Welcome to our earnings adventure. Palantir is on fire. There's been a lot of discussions, basically, how we should talk about these numbers and people admonishing me to be a little more modest. And we'll try. The reality of what's going on is that this is a unvarnished cacophony of the combination of 20 years of investment and a massive cultural shift in the U.S., which is generating numbers, again, 71% growth in U.S. commercial, 71%. We had journalists this morning that were asking me if it's a 7 handle. It 71% growth. We had 45% growth in our U.S. government business. Every 3 days, you read a headline about how our commercial business would be in danger because of necessary pressure put on the system to root out fraud, waste, and abuse, and to pen test systems to see if they create more value or much more value or less value or no value in the U.S. government. We are seeing rapid expansion and very significant demand for Maven, both in America and outside of America, as all part of our core mission to provide an unfair advantage to the noble warriors of the West. We see an increased recognition that large language models were commodities, that the value of these commodities becomes only realizable in the context of our ontology on top of Foundry. As has been mentioned, the reindustrialization of America is happening in our software. The ability to reimagine your business in a volatile situation happens in our software. If you take the 90% of our business that is outside of Europe, which is going through very structural change and doesn't quite get AI, maybe in the near future will get AI, we are hoping and praying, that part of our business grew 49%. 49%. And we're doing this at a very significant scale. We're saying we're going to do close to $4 billion in revenue. And last, not least, we're doing this with double the gold standard on the Rule of 40. The Rule of 40 is a very important standard because it shows you the quality of your revenue and because it's hard to attain, especially if you have a Rule of 83. And, one of the things that Palantir is doing is we want to bring our friends and our allies along with us on this winning ride. Those friends are largely in America, but also among allied countries. Those friends are inside Palantir, outside Palantir. And we are using ontology and AI, or AIP, to drive these successes. And I would say profitability is apparently, unpopular. The numbers are driven by the fact that we are downstream from value creation. There's a consensus in the market that Palantir owns value creation. And what does that actually mean? It means that when you use our software, when you use AIP, you will get demonstrably more value than what you're paying for, and you will share some of that value with us. And then I would say also, culturally, we just don't see the resistance to the way we roll that we did in the past. We would show up in the past, the freak show, trying to get things to work, not with the wrong access to the wrong people at the wrong time. And that was by intent. And people were very uncomfortable at all levels of the enterprise working with us. And without going into specific names, because, these companies in many cases, are in the middle of transforming themselves, but I'm on the front line with everyone here. And it used to be 2 years ago that we might get a CEO, we might get a CIO, we might get someone in marketing, we might get someone who's willing to rebuild the business, but they had no power. Now we have the full stack engaged with us, inside government, outside government, on the most critical issues. And if you look at the math in terms of where the action is, our business is growing 49%, ex-continental Europe, 49%, Rule of 83. We were the freak show. And we spent 20 years for this moment, and we plan to have nose to the grindstone, focus on taking the best talent inside Palantir, managing them, the best clients, and make sure our clients and our partners, especially in national security, but also with a pretty significant focus on the U.S., win in the way we're winning. And that's why you get these results. And we're going to just focus and focus and focus and focus on execution. And that's basically our plan for the rest of the year and into next year. And we're very, very optimistic about what's going on. And with that, we can kick it off to questions.
Thanks, Alex. We'll now turn to a few questions from our shareholders before opening up the call. Our first question is from Gabriel, who asks, how does Palantir plan to sustain its competitive advantage in AI, particularly in light of growing competition?
Thanks, Gabriel. Well, our advantage comes down to ontology. It's really an advantage on the AI demand side. And that has positioned AIP to be the platform that is able to capture the ever-expanding capability of the raw LLMs and turn that into business value. AIP is that tool factory and the point of control for the orchestration with these models and those tools. You can see this in the sharp opinionation that we've earned in the field with our customers and how to get to value in days or weeks. And most critically, you can see it in the insight that we have that to practically transform the enterprise, you actually need mixed human AI teams. And that is something that AIP is uniquely positioned for.
Thank you, Shyam. We also received a few questions on this topic. How will the current U.S. administration's focus on reducing federal spend, as well as the February announcement of U.S. Department of Defense budget cuts, impact current contracts as well as future contract acquisition?
The first thing I'd say is this is the right thing for the country. We have way too much spend on things that do not work. The government has started to resemble a finely marbled Wagyu. The fake projects that do not deliver and will never deliver crowd out and suffocate the things that could actually be excellent. And so we welcome DOGE. I mean, to me, these guys are heroes. They are world-class technologists that could be choosing to do anything. And instead, they are choosing to do this. And we believe deeply in the actual value that our software is creating, both on an absolute basis and on a relative basis to the traditional labor-based cost-plus model that has failed to deliver for the American people.
We often get variants of if the institutions are in pressure, either we go through a difficult time in America or there's DOGE, how will that affect your software sales, basically? And Palantir does exceptionally well when things are pen tested. We like pressure on the system. We need pressure on the system. And then why is it better for America? Because that pen testing forces you to ask questions like, does the software work? How does it work? How does it manage ethical concerns? How does it manage data protection? How does it manage output? Without pressure on the system, one of the myths is that if you don't have pressure on the system, you just spend money, you somehow get a better system, both in terms of output and in terms of ethics. But actually, you get neither. And so in reality, we need pressure on the system. We need people to have to change. We need people to have to transform. This is why they put up with us. And once they see those results, they stick with us.
Thank you both. Our next question is from Dan with Wedbush. Dan, please turn on your camera, and then you'll receive a prompt to unmute your line.
Thanks, and another amazing quarter. So my question is, given what we're seeing in the government, isn't that another opportunity where you could actually gain more share of budgets as you go to more meritocracy? Palantir should actually gain more dollars within the budgets of DoD and a lot of other agencies.
We're very optimistic about what we're going to do in the U.S., but the devil's in the details. And we're running this business for you, with you as owners, which means it's there's going to be maybe lumpiness, but we predict we're going to do very, very well. Basically, where you have pressure testing, you can assume AIP, AI Foundry, Ontology, Apollo, and the Palantir culture itself. I mean, we are a warrior culture. That's why our whole culture is built around putting the exact right team and the exact right product at the final mile. And so where you have environments that are crucial and under pressure, you can expect, and where meritocracy happens. It's we need meritocracy. How do you get meritocracy? Well, there's lots of ways to get meritocracy. One way is because you're scared. And then you buy the best product, you install the best product, and then the part that's or correlated different than people think is you also get the best ethics, the best execution, and that, of course, and then you can ask a simple question. Why is this a moat? Okay, well, I can tell you why it's a moat, because heretofore, no one has gotten into these environments at scale under any circumstance. And if they did get in, they got in with services. So now we have a single-purposed, highly formed stack of software that is exactly right for this moment, with a culture that's exactly right to implement it, which a culture that can teach people how to do this, that is now charismatic for some, it's anti-charismatic for others. And that de facto, it's the compounding rate of return on that stack. And to Shyam's opinion, with the opinionation we have about how to do this, it essentially allows you to express your tribal knowledge of your enterprise in a way you could never do it before, on the terms of your enterprise, with unit economics that are heretofore impossible to do. And that's what's happening in this country, and really in 90% of our market, which explains like the 49% growth and the rule of 83, despite our what would be viewed on the outside as large ineptitudes in sales and go-to-market and how do we interact with people, and our opinionation, both on the outside, on the inside, and with the frontline customer, which is like, we're not agnostic to using our software as self-ware. We are not in the shelfware business, which is another reason why pressure in the government really helps us. We've never done shelfware. We don't do shelfware. We don't think our personality can afford shelfware.
Thank you, Alex. Our next question is from Mariana with Bank of America. Mariana, please turn on your camera, and then you'll receive a prompt to unmute your line.
So I have two questions. First one is on the European defense buildup. You mentioned warp speed and how that has been successful here. Like, are you interested in applying that as these European countries build up their own defenses and catch up on industrial capabilities that have been underinvested for like many, many years? And the second one is, I think investors are pretty familiar with this like software versus services type of like Palantir approach, because you have been like actually leaders on that trend. But Titan is a great example on how like software actually played a role that was more intuitively hardware. Where else you actually have opportunities for software to add value there? Like, is it Golden Dome? Is space communications? Like, have you think about that?
Yeah, on the first one, Alex may have more to say as well, but we would love to help Europe on the manufacturing challenges around rearmament, and I think there are a lot of them to do. The precondition for warp speed is understanding that the existing manufacturing stack is broken. And so you could say, why did America get there first? Because you have all these people who are essentially the progeny of Elon, who have learned and understood how to actually make things, the sort of brains that go from the Raptor 1 to the Raptor 3 engine. And that's proliferated around the community that's in El Segundo and even beyond. That's like the basis of reindustrialization in America. And so it's when we work with the new defense champions, new industrial champions, like it's a very short sales cycle, because they recognize like that what we're doing with warp speed is exactly what they need in order to do it. When you work with some of the older manufacturing customers, even in the US, it's heterogeneous. Some of them are already there, they get it, they realize it. Some of them are going to be there because it's just a reality. In Europe, there are some green shoots, like some very well-known manufacturing companies have kind of said like, oh, I now understand that my ERP thing doesn't work and warp speed, maybe we should get warp speed. So I just don't want to commit too much. I think a lot of it is where's the customer's head at, but we could obviously do a lot to help you.
Look, Europe doesn't get AI yet. At some point in the future it will. And then, as you know, Europe is not Europe. You have Eastern Europe, you have Germany, France, you have they're very different Europes. Europe that is scared understands that you're going to have to do software, hardware, hybrid systems. And our products are very, very well known and differentiated. It could take a couple years for Europe to understand that you just can't spend money. You're going to have to spend it on things that actually work, and work means spending it on people that have actually done this on the battlefield. I would say our plan is to continue to be roughly in the zone where 90% of our business is growing like it is now at 49% with this rule of 83, and somewhere in that range we guided to rule of 80. And that's going to be primarily driven by the U.S. I would say as a unknown variable, we're seeing very significant demand for our software, our government software, around the world outside of Europe. And those are early days, but the demand, the signal there is very strong.
And then on the Titan point, I think that's an excellent point and is going to be a big part of the future, where you're really thinking about how do you build your hardware around the software. You know, there are some classified projects that we have as well, where the first step to building the hardware is not to build the hardware. It's actually to build the mission payload and the software that can execute the thing, and then work backwards from that to figure out what is the hardware that you ought to have around that. And this plays to this, like it is actually a cultural impedance mismatch. Like if you're a hardware company, you think about the world the way that a construction person would think about building the house. You have to pour the foundation first. You can't do anything. But actually with software, you have to build the kitchen first. If you don't, you're gonna get it all wrong. And so I've seen a lot more of the next gen programs that are starting to think about how do we build the lethal software first, and we'll figure out how to wrap the hardware.
One
around.
of the most interesting things about the current environment we're in is something Sham is alluding to, which is, and again, it's a European versus American. People assume if you're world-class at hardware, you'll be world-class at software and they're interchangeable. It's just not true at all. And like the skills and the taste you need to do software is a completely different thing. And America's unique advantage is hybrid software, hardware, software, and any program that's trying to outpace and beat our adversaries it basically is going to have to begin with a software first or software hardware hybrid program, because otherwise we're at a disadvantage. And also the resourcing and the way you organize is going to be suboptimal in this country. Conversely, this is one of the challenges that some of our allies and our adversaries have. The role of taste in getting these things to work, tribal knowledge and ability to do it, is really, really underestimated.
Alex, as always, we have a lot of individual investors on the line. Is there anything you'd like to say before we wrap up the call?
This company is organized around giving our friends a really strong shot, I would say unfair advantage, and not helping our adversaries or enemies and on occasion hurting them. And a lot of you are scattered around the world and helping us in many ways. And we are in a phase where we are very focused on scaling our company. We really appreciate your support and the fact that you defend us. Our support of Western values is often under attack for somewhat idiotic reasons. Our belief that meritocracy will lead us to a better place, that competence is better than incompetence, that competence includes ethics, and the results, the fruits of those labors are here today, but none of that would have been possible without your support. So thank you.
Thank you. That concludes Q&A for today's call.